care about social justice and climate change and climate justice. So I'm really happy to see you all here. Let's have a clap for showing up. I'm Julia Mccray, the first Vice President of the Surrey Teachers Association. This conference is sponsored by the Surrey Teachers Association, the British Columbia Teachers Federation, Delta Teachers, Vesta Teachers, and Coquitlam Teachers. So that's great. The unions are stepping up to put on this type of conference for the teachers and other people in the community. I think we're in historic days in our province and in our country. I'm proud to be in support of Wet'suwet'en and the blockades that are going on. And now I just want to say a word. I went down to the rail blockade last weekend, and that is tough. That is tough, hard work. That is standing on gravel with creepy people around and feeling kind of threatened, and it's not easy. And so the climate action people are doing hard work for all of us. And I want to know that this is an important time in our country. I want to say, young people standing up, I see your disciplined organizing. I see your peaceful ways. I see your strong resistance. I admire your clear-mindedness. And I see the attacks on you, and that's not fair. This conference is about responding to kids. The kids are rising up and demanding that we do all that we can to change our ways and the ways of our society. Teachers also need to do more and change our ways in the classroom and in our lives. I don't want to go on, and I'm not making a long speech. I'm going to introduce you to my former student. I'm really thrilled. Trenton Pierre. His traditional name is Slamuch from Kéti Nation. He is now an artist and a speaker. I'm looking forward to hearing from him. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. How's it going? My name is Trenton Pierre. I am from Kéti First Nations. I am Indigenous. I grew up on Kéti First Nations for a majority of my life, and coming from there, I would just like to welcome everybody to our shared territory. We are also on the Semiahmoo lands and also Kwantlen, shared with Kéti. I would just like to put my hands up to everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Because of all the stuff that we're going through in the world today, it's so important for us to stand together, especially when you have a voice. I grew up on a reservation. I have 4 older brothers, and life was pretty tough. And growing up in this world today, we're still on a sense of recovery from residential school and all the stuff that happened to us. But to see everybody come together and really hone in on what we can do and achieve if we support each other, it's so imperative in our growth as people. So I was just like you few students out there. I was a student at one point at Fraser Heights Secondary, and I decided to go into a career within the civil engineering realm. I worked my butt off to get there and make a name for myself, especially as a First Nations person. And one of the biggest things that I noticed, especially on the end of my career, I wasn't happy. I really needed to tune in on what was happening to me, and I couldn't quite figure it out. I don't know if I asked the Creator, God, or the universe, but I was traveling all over BC, building bridges and highways with a team of engineers, and something just wasn't right. So I don't know if I asked the higher ups on what could change. I went home that night and I literally took off my hard hat, my steel-toe boots, and my vest, sat on the couch, and I started scrolling on my phone. And when I was scrolling on my phone, I stumbled across a video of spray painting. And I watched it like 10 times over. It was the first time my heart fluttered for anything. It was an awakening. I went out that evening to Home Depot, and I wanted to pick out my favorite colors that I like. And I was unfortunately late to get to Michael's, and they were just closing. And I was a little devastated, not gonna lie. But I went home, and I pulled a painting that I just purchased off the wall, and I painted it white. It was the first canvas I ever used. I painted something that evening, and my life completely changed. It turned out phenomenal, but it was the first time that my heart was passionate about something. I literally leaned this painting against the wall and I started to cry. And I was wondering, what is this? Is this a new life for me? I spent the last 7 years working on a career building bridges and highways, going through the schooling and on the whole process to make a name for myself. But this painting brought me more happiness than anything I've ever done in that career. 2 days later, I quit my job. I left it all behind to become an artist, and now I get to share my story. And what I do is I work in school districts to really get the next generation to hone in on changing their internal compass towards a life of passion, opposed money. And when we're talking about these things, it's really tough to gauge that part of your life, because which avenue do you go to? Which one will you find happiness? The only thing that I can say that worked for me is you gotta trust your journey and ask those questions to the higher ups. What could happen to me? During this whole time, I've been working on the art career. It's been 3 years now. 2016, October 16th was when I painted this painting. And ever since then, I've been traveling all over doing motivational speaking. And also, I've got art projects all over the Lower Mainland, including a bridge. I got 3 buildings now, and a lot of murals that I create with students. I call them interactive murals. And I really get their ideas on what they would like to see in their schools, as, you know, it's their home for education. There's one thing that I've noticed is it's kind of difficult to wake up people's dreams, because we're pigeonholed into these avenues that really force us to pick what kind of career we want, where we want our lives to go. And it's difficult just to listen to your intuition on what's happening with you. The only advice that I can give you in that regard is you're the only person that can say no, truly. You as an individual is the only person that can say no to your dreams and your voice. It's imperative to knock down those other barriers that are around you, what people say, what people will think of you. Anything that can come your way, you have to stick strong to your vision and your voice. In my art career, I've come over some obstacles, speed bumps that are difficult, especially as a First Nations person. One of my projects, which was dealing with the city, they came to us and said, can we have some of your artwork for the reconciliation that's happening in Canada? I said, absolutely, I'll draw you something. And I drew a traditional mask. It was a tribute to my people's cultural survival. It was a tribute to my dad. He's an elder that survived residential school. Within 1 hour of submitting this design, I got it back with an email saying, we're sorry, Mr. Pierre. We will not be able to use your artwork because people will think it's demonic. So I read this email and I sat down and I said, a lot of emotions came out, let's put it that way. I typed out a bunch of emails and I deleted it, typed it out and deleted it, and I did something that my dad told me, take 2 days before you respond to this. And I recommend that to anyone if you're feeling some sort of emotion. Really, just give yourself time to simmer down, because you don't want to say something that you can't take back. So I sat there and I responded to the person that said this. I said, I would like to speak to your boss, and I don't think this is okay. And it wasn't. I knew something inside me was kind of feeling that I need to say something about this, and I did. It turns out his boss also said, you know, I don't see an issue with this. So I said, okay, well, me being me, I was like, okay, I'll talk to the person that's higher up than you. And by this point, it was reaching the city council. And I was just baffled that I still had to present a case in front of the Art Advisory Committee, which is a prestigious group of people from different deans of schools, art sectors, you name it. There's 18 people around this table. And I had to defend my artwork. I had to tell them, first of all, why is this term being tossed around today? I come from generations of my people being called demons and heathens, good for nothings. We were placed on reservations to really keep us away from society and to kill the Indian inside of us. And you come to our land saying, we want some artwork that represents who you are, but it's got to look this way. I presented my case and I said, this mask is a tribute to my people's survival. We survived attempted genocide and we are still here. And we are thriving. I just asked the city if they could remove the Christian Catholic lens that they have currently, evaluating all the artwork going through the city with an equal lens, because we deserve that. As artists, anybody in this world deserves equality. As a two-spirited person, I know very much about that. It's important that we treat each other with fairness because we're all humans, we're all here in this together, and standing together for something that you believe in is so imperative for growth. When I was done my speech, everyone around that table stood up and half the people were crying and they apologized that we didn't know this was happening in our art sector. My biggest thing was, what if that was my niece? What if it was just a baby that drew what she knows about our culture? Would she still get the same response? They stood up and they said, Mr. Pierre, you can put your artwork on the front of the building. And they gave me extra window space. As hard as that meeting was, I stood up and I defended what I believed in, and that was my culture and my artwork. I'm sharing this story with you because we're here today for the environment. I told you that story because it's so important to listen to what's going on in here rather than what anybody thinks about you. It's important to stand up for what you believe in. All it takes is one idea from one person to ignite the fire to change the world. What's happening across Canada right now, standing up against a pipeline. I couldn't be more happy to witness this because that shows the true power of our people when we stand together. People talk about something called reconciliation, truth and reconciliation going on across Canada. Who here has heard of that? Good. When they talk about truth and reconciliation, previously I've been talking about it heavily in my presentations, but it's difficult to talk about reconciliation when this is still happening in Canada. My brothers and sisters across the East Coast still don't have drinking water. There's this pipeline that the entire country needs to stand up against. Is this really reconciliation? I have kind of stopped using that term in my presentations because I'm on a different journey. I'm going to create my own thing. I call it spreading the love. I'm using my whole vision of my artwork as spreading the love because I think it's important that we all stand together, especially when we're going through things. What I give as a vision in terms of reconciliation, if someone still doesn't have a clear idea of what it is, I'm just going to give you an idea of what it means. Everyone knows what a dream catcher is. Circular, hole. My people, imagine my people like this dream catcher. We're circular and we're whole and we're full. Below this dream catcher circle, there was feathers hanging, 2 of them, which represents our cultures and our traditions. Within this dream catcher, we have the intricate webbing that represents our ties of our people, all of my families and everyone together as nations. When that was put together, there's a bunch of beads that were on this dream catcher that represented who we are: loving, caring, genuine, honorable, wise. When we were discovered, it's like somebody came, put their hand inside the dream catcher, and the clock started ticking. The threads began to break and the beads began to fall. There was one thread left as time went on. This thread was our elders. They're the sole reason why we're here. They hit our drums, our masks, our songs, and everything in the mountains. They were the ones that survived residential school and attempted genocide. I love my elders so much for doing that for my people. What we're doing today, being here together, is spreading the love or reconciliation. We're building a new Dreamcatcher together. And that's what we're doing here today, is uniting different minds together to protect the world that we live in. The environment is in crisis, and you have a voice to stop this crisis. It's up to you to ignite that fire and save the world. You literally can, just with your mind. It's up to you to keep going with it. Stick with your dreams. Stick with your hopes. Don't give up. It's so important to have sessions like this. We all deserve to be here, and we all deserve to have love in our life. This is our home, and we have to protect it. The last thing I'm going to say is just stand up for what you believe in, regardless of what people say. You have a voice, you deserve to be here, and I just couldn't be more happy to be invited to give the opening for this wonderful event. Thank you.
So, about 2 years ago, when I heard that rain was falling at 48 degrees Celsius in California, I was a bit disturbed. I don't know if you remember that. And I wrote a blog that said, what do we teach while the world is burning? I'm very, very excited to tell you today that some climate activists are going to tell us exactly what they'd like us to be teaching today. We have a panel of teens, and Claudia Ruitenberg, a professor out at UBC, who I've known for, over 10 years, I think, who wrote a book called Unlocking the World, where she talks about our role as teachers, as hosts of, for students, welcoming them into the world. And what troubled me is, what kind of host am I if I'm inviting them into a world that's on fire? So she's here to moderate the panel. She had an amazing discussion with the teens yesterday. I wish we had filmed that. It was mind-blowing. Or as the teens say, so with that, I'm going to welcome Claudia, Julia, Ella, Asha, Rebecca, Imogen, and Zoe. Come on up.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Julia Mccray and Lizanne Foster for this opportunity. It's really my great pleasure and privilege to be here with these fabulous climate activists and facilitate the opening panel. I'd also like to thank Trenton Pierre, and you may not hear it anymore, but I think what we're going to try to do, using his words, is paint an interactive mural with words. What do we teach when the world is burning?
And what can we expect young people to want to learn when the world is burning? The phrase, "the world is burning," can be taken literally, as Lizanne just illustrated. We've seen devastating forest fires around the world, parts of Australia, California, Brazil, Indonesia, northern Alberta, Greece, could go on. In that most literal sense, when the world is burning outside the window of one's home or school, all we teach and learn is survival and evacuation. But in a more figurative sense, the world is burning also refers to the world melting, flooding, drying out, and losing species. And some of those phenomena happen more gradually than forest fires and are easier to ignore in the immediacy of our everyday lives. Moreover, the world is burning unevenly, with some peoples and regions suffering the effects more acutely, while others can continue to shield themselves from these effects. A world that is burning, as Lizanne said, literally and figuratively, is not a hospitable world, a world in which those who have long futures ahead of them can imagine making a life for themselves. That puts teachers, and by that I mean everyone in a teaching role, whether that's formal or informal, in a difficult position. Because in my view, the primary task of education is to open up the world, to unlock it, and make it available to young people as their world so they can make a place for themselves there. How can teaching be guided by an ethic of hospitality, that sense of responsibility for unlocking the world when the world is burning? In earlier work about this ethic of hospitality, I wrote that if a teacher unlocks the world, if the world a teacher unlocks for a student is a world inhospitable to that student, unlocking isn't good enough. The teacher also has a responsibility to help the student imagine how that currently inhospitable world may become a more hospitable place. Not doing this would be like a host unlocking the door to a room full of poisonous spiders and saying to the guest, "There you are, make yourself at home." I was thinking, especially when I wrote that, of a world made inhospitable by social injustice, of the challenge of, say, quote-unquote, welcoming a racialized student into a racist world, a queer student into a homophobic world, and so forth. But I also needed to extend my thinking to include the complicated intersections of these social injustices with the ecological and intergenerational injustice of environmental degradation and the climate crisis. Today, youth are not just asking for the world to be unlocked, they are making the political demand that the world adults are unlocking is preserved and restored to enable a livable future. The emergence of youth leaders in the climate justice movement and the environmental movement more generally has been significant and requires our attention not just to the ethical register of hospitality, but the political register of solidarity. One of the questions we should ask is how adults, and teachers in particular, can work in political solidarity with youth climate activists. And I say political solidarity because there are other kinds of solidarity that I think are less helpful today. The bar of political solidarity is higher, and we need to think carefully about what it means to meet it. In some other forms of solidarity, like social or cultural solidarity, we have a sense of unity based on a shared social or cultural identity, such as within a family. But in political solidarity, and I'm using the work of the American philosopher Sally Schultz here, the sense of unity follows from the joint action rather than giving rise to it. For example, I may not have many or any social identities in common with Honduran families separated at the US border. I'm not Honduran, I don't have children, and I'm not seeking to immigrate into the US. But once I join in political solidarity with them, we become united in our shared opposition to US immigration policies. What unites those who stand in solidarity with those with whom they declare themselves in solidarity is a shared commitment, I quote, to abolishing an unjust social or political order. And I emphasize this idea of commitment because it is more demanding than, for example, sympathy. Where sympathy with the plight of those affected or most affected by injustice may originally give rise to political solidarity, the latter must involve more than feelings of sympathy. The important difference, says Schultz, quote, is that solidarity requires positive duties like social activism, end quote. In other words, for adults to stand in political solidarity with youth, these adults must themselves be willing to engage in social activism, not just to express support or encouragement for youth social activism. Just saying to student activists, "Well done, it's so great to see that you're doing this," does not constitute political solidarity. As Schultz puts it, political solidarity calls for sacrifices, so it is not undertaken lightly. Now, I realize that the question of whether and how teachers can act in solidarity with youth climate activists is more specific than the question of whether and how adults can act in solidarity with them. Teachers, after all, are not just any group of adults, but adults with a particular responsibility towards youth. So how can teachers act in political solidarity with youth climate activists while also maintaining a welcoming relation with youth who don't see themselves as climate activists, or whose families might work in the oil and gas industry? And conversely, how can teachers not act in political solidarity with youth climate activists and still meet their responsibility of helping to preserve and restore the world they are unlocking for youth? These are difficult questions, and you may be both dismayed and relieved to hear that I do not have the answers to them. But I'm hopeful that both the conversation with our panelists and the workshops later in the afternoon will help us all make some headway in grappling with these questions. Now, as Lizanne alluded to, the panelists and I talked for several hours yesterday and this morning in preparation, and I can assure you they have important things to say to teachers and administrators, especially those who would like to pay more attention to the climate crisis in their teaching but aren't quite sure yet how to do this, or those who would like to support youth climate activists but aren't quite sure how to do that. So I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then we will move into some questions. And we'll see how this choreography works out. On the far end there, we have Arsha Appel, a grade 12 student at Enfer Creek Secondary in Surrey, and co-founder of the Climate Clock, an organization of Surrey youth fighting to reverse the climate clock. She's also involved in sustainability. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this idea of the climate clock, it's what you're watching behind us. This particular one was designed by a Concordia professor, Damon Matthews, together with the musician, David Usher. And we will come back to this in a second. It shows how much, or rather how little time is left until we hit 1.5 degrees warming. Climate Clock in Surrey also raised funds for the Climate Action Network Canada. Next to that, we have Julia and Ella. Julia Zernheld and Ella Cruz, grade 7 students at Columnitza Middle School in Williams Lake, which for those of you who are geographically challenged is about halfway between Kamloops and Prince George. They are climate strike organizers, I think organizers of the first climate strike in Williams Lake. Ella has also volunteered with the Caribou Chilcotin Conservation Society, and they're both members of the Greenologists Club at their school. I think that's an awesome name, the Greenologists Club at their school. And they're both soccer players, and Julia plays several instruments. We have Rebecca Hamilton, a grade 12 student at Lord Byng Secondary, and one of the sustainability teens who organized the large Vancouver climate strike on September 27th, 2019. The sustainability teams have been active since December 2018 and have organized several other protests and continue to organize protests. This year, Rebecca's been focused on developing sustainability teams or sustainability teams in high schools. Emma Jane Burian is a grade 12 student with self-designed learning community in Victoria and an organizer of climate protests on Vancouver Island as part of Climate Strike Canada and Our Earth, Our Future Victoria. She's currently working on the April 3rd climate strike, remember that date, which is focused on new growth. And last but not least, we have Zoe Sherman, a grade 8 student at Washington Middle School in Seattle, Washington, a weekly climate striker in Seattle, and a member of Climate Action Families and Fridays for Future in the state of Washington. She helped to organize several major climate strikes, including the one on September 20th, 2019. We have quite the company here. Yes, here, somebody wants to, okay, there. I'm adamant that we leave it up. So maybe Rebecca, I can ask you first. Why are we leaving this up?
Okay.
Mike next to you if you want, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, so we wanted to leave this up because we wanted to show you all, our teachers, how we feel when we're sitting in your classes. In that, I love learning. I love sitting in my classes. I love my philosophy class and biology, but it's in the back of my mind as the teacher's talking and as I'm working on things, I always have this countdown in my head of every second that I'm sitting in this classroom is 1 second that we're getting closer to irreversible climate catastrophe. And that's really frustrating and really terrifying and a difficult thing for our generation to grapple with. And so we wanted to make this visual for the adults.
Do you want to add something to that, Arsha?
Yeah, so as Rebecca was saying, I totally agree with what she was saying. I mean, you're kind of just staring at that clock and looking at that time ticking down. It's also as if hey, this is time that I could be using to be planning a bunch of strikes or planning other stuff. And here I am sitting in calc class learning math. But yeah.
As the website for this conference that you've probably seen shows, as well as the little flyer that you got, some of the climate protests have shown signs that say things like, why should I go to school if you won't listen to the educated? And so this is another example of how challenging it can be to be motivated to pay attention to things that seem distant. And at the same time, you do still learn stuff in school that is useful even to your current organizing and activism. So maybe, Emma Jane, can I get you started on highlighting a few things that you are getting in school? Now, you're also perhaps in a less common form of schooling, but kind of stuff that you are learning in school that you're finding really helpful.
Yeah, so like she said in the introduction, I go to Self-Design Learning Community, which is an online school across BC. It is an independent school, but you don't have to pay for it. It's like funded by the government. And one thing that I really love about it is we get to learn from each other. So we do all of our classes online. And for example, I got to present about the climate strikes that I do to students in my class. And they get to present things to me. And this is really inspiring for me as a student because I can learn and explore new ways of the world from like a different worldview than my own. And I think that's really important as we prepare students for the future. We need to be able to think about different ideas and perspectives and collaborate with each other. So that has been really, really valuable in my experience as a student and preparing for the future. Yeah.
Julia, do you want to add something about the kinds of stuff that you're learning and?
I don't think I'm learning anything helpful.
Come on, your teachers might be listening.
Yeah.
You're not learning anything useful.
No, we're not learning about climate change or climate justice at all.
Okay. Are you learning to debate or listen to others or back up your points or?
Yeah, sometimes we're learning to back up our opinions, but
That's kind of it?
yeah.
Yeah. Ella, anything you want to add to that or no? No, okay, we're good. So we need to listen to the fact that it's kind of meager if we're asking students, what are you learning? What are you learning? If people want to join in, right, you're welcome to share. But that's what I was hearing a lot of yesterday. Yeah, we're not learning that much, which we're using right now in the kind of work that we're doing. So the really obvious follow-up question is, what do you think you should be learning more of? What are the kinds of things that you would like your teachers to be teaching you that you're not getting a heck of a lot of? I think Zoe, you were going to talk about that.
Well, one thing that I feel is really important is our rights. Like, we studied the government, we studied that sort of thing, but I still don't know my rights. And I've researched it. Like, all of my friends don't know whether they're gonna get arrested if they skip school to strike and march. They don't know what they can do, and that is not okay. Plus, like, no more sponsored videos, no more people coming into schools and saying that natural gas, which is actually, I believe, don't quote me on this, but 84 times more powerful than coal on about a 100-year scale, is clean. That you can't say that. It's completely inaccurate, and let kids know that they have choices, that they can make choices. Don't tell them which careers they should have, what's effective in the world. Let them know that they have the opportunity to do what they want. Plus, political systems, I gotta say. Like, we learned that there's, so I'm from the US, right? So we learned that there's like 3 branches of government, whatever, right? But what about, like, how do political campaigns work? What are the different roles within different offices? How do state governments work and city governments, right? Yeah, that's most of the things that I feel are really, really important that we need to be learning.
How about Ella? What do you think you really want to be learning in school that you're not getting a lot of?
On the grade 7 curriculum is climate change and for science. And in science, we've been learning nothing about climate change. And instead, we're doing chemistry and stuff like that. So I think we should really learn about climate change, and because a lot of kids in my class don't even really know what it is because they have never been told exactly what it is, and so they don't have much to say about it because they don't know what it is. So if the teacher could educate everyone more around climate change, then it would be a lot better.
I'd also like to add something to that, not just about climate change, maybe the science of it and everything, but like intersectionality, right? Like, not just
how the climate crisis is going to heat the oceans and melt the ice caps, but how it disproportionately impacts communities of color and women, queer people, right?
Thank you. I think, Rebecca, you might want to add a little bit to that as well.
Yeah, I really agree. I think we need to be learning more about, we need to be talking more about climate change and climate science and climate justice. And also I think we need to be learning the skills that will get us out of this crisis. I know that, like yesterday we talked a lot about what we've had to learn for ourselves in the last year of organizing. Like, oh, suddenly we need to organize all these things and bring people together. And there's been a lot of learning. And I think one of the big things that we talked about was learning the skills of how to really productively work together with other people and how to work together with other people in a way that brings out our collective brilliance, and that we're working together in a way where we're valuing everybody and where everybody's voices are heard, and where we learn how to sort of draw some people out, and we learn how to navigate through dynamics in a really intense way. I think, as was so beautifully described in the welcoming, is that to get past this crisis, we need to relearn how to come together, I think, as a society. I think that the climate crisis is in many ways the result of division between we've managed to divide ourselves from being connected to nature, and we say that some people, we've managed to rationalize that some people's lives are more valuable than others. And I think that we really need to learn how to move past that if we're going to get out of this crisis. And something that we were talking about yesterday was how classrooms are not necessarily set up for this type of collective mentality, in the sense that maybe I know I can make more of an effort, but by the end of the year I don't know the name of everybody in my class. I don't necessarily I spend a lot of time with these people, and as students I can learn a lot from other people in the class, and I think that school is an opportunity to learn from other people's perspectives. And I feel we for example talked about spending time at the beginning of the year where we sit in circles with everybody in our class and get to know each other and adopt more of a mentality of we're in this learning process together, because I think that that's the feeling and the skills and the practices that we need to be adopting on a society level. So some of those soft skills in addition to the actual what is happening with climate change.
Thank you. One of the things that was incredible hearing you talk yesterday was all the examples you gave of meeting with this mayor and that city councillor and this MLA and that MP and this premier, and that it went on and on and on, and how to figure out how to get permits and figure out what your rights really are in spite of what people say and all of that. And then I said, how much of this did you learn in school? And the answer was nothing, or the bare bones of there are 3 levels of government, and this is right, in the abstract. Maybe Arsha and Emma Jane, you both had really concrete examples, which I thought were just incredible, of how much you are educating yourselves and educating each other within your youth communities about all of these things that you need to know.
So I think that, it's really disappointing that we don't learn that stuff in school. We learn the bare minimum of presentation skills and stuff like that. But one of the things that I think has been really powerful is how this movement, our generation, there's so many levels and grades of people in it. So for example, I'm in grade 12, but there's lots of people in the movement that are in grade 7, 6, and even elementary school and stuff like that. And so it's been really a great opportunity for us to mentor each other and be hey, this is how we can work together. This is how to go to a meeting with a counselor. That can be really scary when you first do it. I know that when I first did that, I was I don't know what to talk. I don't know how to talk to these people. And it's been really great to try to figure out having the trial and error with that, but I think that it would have been way beneficial if we learned that stuff in school.
because I think that I would have been able to go in with a greater sense of that I knew what I was doing, because I really felt like I didn't. And it has been amazing to talk to other students and collaborate. And like Rebecca said, I think it's really important that we get to know people in our classes, and we really, because that collaboration is what we need to solve this crisis and to solve all of the problems. And like you mentioned, the intersectionality, like collaboration is really the key to this. And so we need to allow our students to collaborate with each other and to not just be about our individual selves. Yeah, because that mindset of like, this is all about me is kind of what put us in this mess. And so yeah, I just think that's really important.
Yeah, so I think a big thing for me was communication skills, and I feel like in schools, when we do school projects or stuff like that, it's just like the teacher says, here's your group, okay, now figure out what you need to do. And as we talked about yesterday, we just pick the most efficient route and the route that will guarantee us the best grade, and it's like there's no creativity within that. And I feel like within school classrooms and stuff like that, if we could have more like teamwork as a class and not just like your own individual stuff, and when you do a group project, make it more so just like, hey, you need to figure this out. Because I know something that we struggle with in our organization is figuring out teamwork and collaborating and communication, and our team lacks in communication skills, and that's something that we're working on as well. And it's something that like these skills should be taught in our classrooms, because it's hard to figure out by ourselves. And I know when I first met the first city councilor I talked to was very daunting, as Emma said. And so I feel like with that, we should just learn. I know we do public speaking, and we do have like all these speeches that we give, but working on those speeches and working on the techniques and how we need to talk to people, I feel like a lot of us also as students just lack basic like how to talk to someone and skills like that are very important to develop. And I feel like that's something that realistically is more important than just learning how to remember, I don't know, bio terms and stuff like that. Like I feel like we need to pay more attention to these skills that we're going to apply to our lifetime after high school. But yeah.
Thank you. Rebecca, you want to add something? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. And with so this is a bit off of the politicians, but with working in teams, I know something that I really noticed, like when we started organizing last year, is that we are taught to like do what we are given, and people get very good at like following instructions, and that's great. Like that is an important skill. But when you're like trying to figure out what to do next in like your youth climate justice movement and figuring out like what the heck, how do we create a strategy? Like what is most effective? And also just like there isn't necessarily someone there to give you instructions, and it's all about like coming up with identifying what is needed and identifying what the next step is. And I think that like because we're all youth and there's no adult involved, there's no adult planning things, and so it's learning learning how to take initiative and how to like identify what's needed and how to like offer help and to generate ideas of what could be effective to come next is super crucial.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and you made me think of something I was going to say. I think that you really need to empower students to be decision makers in their own lives. Because like Rebecca said, it's really daunting when you're like, all of a sudden I've been just like fed all of this information and we kind of like just have to absorb it, and it's like, well, how does this fit into my life? But when we're in a youth climate justice movement, we need to be able to think and make decisions for ourselves, and I think that students need to be empowered from a young age to make their own decisions that affect their futures.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to bring up one thing that you kind of can't miss looking at this panel. As you've seen in the media, a lot of the current leaders of the climate justice movement are girls and women. So one of the things we talked about, yeah, right. So I don't want to talk about this as if this is a problem. I think it's rather cool myself. But where are the guys?
We talked yesterday about some of the things that have been written in the media, for example, and Zoe already mentioned, especially outside North America, women are disproportionately affected by climate change, and so that can really be a motivation to get involved. There's some other explanations for why women and girls are taking the lead. Who's going to comment on this? Emma Jane?
Okay, so yeah, we were talking about this a lot, and I think people brought up so many good points. And I was sitting there yesterday, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, like, I never really think about this, but like, yeah, like, it's so interesting, like, how does this happen, and what are the dynamics? And I think Zoe brought up, it's like a societal thing. And I started thinking about that, and then I was like, you know what? Like, from the beginning, women have been taught to help other people, to be nurturers, to always be there for others, always taking care of people. And so I think it's that innate sense of like this mothering nature that like we have to take care of everyone else that is really part of this whole thing. And so I don't know if it's all of it, but that was one thing that I was thinking about. It's like we have been the caregivers for generations. And so I think that possibly men feel like they can't also be caregivers. And I think that's where the problem is.
So Zoe, you want to add something to that?
Yeah. Toxic masculinity. There's all of these constructs around how, like, these people have to be cool. Like, to be cool, you have to be like a jerk.
Like a jerk, right? No, it's not. It's for some reason it's not cool to care about things. Or I mean, you can care about video games, but it's not cool. It's not cool to care about things that girls care about. It's right. That's something I've seen. Plus, like, climate activists, at least myself and many of my friends in Seattle, are frequently like made fun of for being activists. And something that I've seen is the people who always do that, it's only guys. It seems like we're an easy target because most of the time we're women. Like, take the Visco girl stereotype. I don't know how many of you guys know what that is.
They definitely had to educate me yesterday about a disco girl. I felt mildly geriatric.
It's a stereotype about women being climate activists, right? It seems like it's an easy target, yeah. I don't know. Toxic masculinity is a problem. Let's try and fix it in our school systems.
Did anybody else want to weigh in on the? Oh, I wanted to ask Arsha because you have a different experience. So the stats for sustainability, like the active is like 3 out of 40. 3 out of 40 are guys. That's not your experience.
Yeah, so when I went sustainability, I also noticed that problem, like there was just mainly girls. But then with the climate clock in Surrey, there's actually like about an even split. It's like there might be a few more girls, but there are a few guys actually. And so yesterday we were talking about this, and Surrey is like predominantly a South Asian community, and so most of the guys in the climate clock are South Asian. And so I was just talking about this, like, and I noticed in like my school there are 2 type of guys, but then there is this one group of guys that do actually care about stuff like this, and they do keep up with current events, and they are like interested in stuff like this. And I feel like with you guys, like you don't have many guys in your organizations, but I feel like in Surrey, like surprisingly enough, we do have an even amount, and I was like, wow, this is kind of cool, because usually we're actually seen as like not as progressive and stuff, but here we are, and it's cool, yeah.
That's great to hear. We were also, yesterday, part of the, I think, subversive intention of bringing them all together yesterday was also to connect them. So we'll see sort of how they're going to build more bridges between their various organizations. In my introduction, I asked, I kind of pushed what it means for teachers to really stand and act in solidarity, and not just say that they support you, but to act in solidarity. How would you describe what you're asking of your teachers, besides sort of the additional stuff you want them to teach you, and how you are expecting them to act in solidarity with you? Julia?
I think they should stop, like, patting me on the back, high-fiving me, and like taking risk and acting, like bringing the class out to strike, and in their own life, like coming to strike with us.
So had you had some resistance to that when you were trying to suggest you wanted some support from your teachers?
Yes. Last year when we organized the climate strike, we asked our principal if we could put up posters, and she said no, and she was not very happy with us going up.
So I think you were asking for a half day that students could walk out, and what was the answer?
She said we could have a half hour in the parking lot.
Where nobody could see you. So what'd you do?
We just ignored it and we went out anyways.
Who else might want to ask something to this? Julia or Zoe? About what does it mean for your teachers to stand in solidarity?
Thank you. Testifying or speaking at like school board meetings, maybe within the school you might have someone like your boss who isn't very supportive of this, and so you're worried about your job, and I understand that. So, but yeah, sharing your story and your student stories at school board meetings and stuff like that can be very effective, and it's really important. Plus, using your curriculum opportunities when you have a chance to talk about the climate crisis, use it. Don't switch it out for something else, right? Yeah, so in my school, we were going to have an op-ed. We were going to be writing an op-ed. We were all so excited, at least I was really excited, right? We got a chance to like learn about how to do that. And instead of that, we're doing mystery. We're writing mystery. It's less fun. Like, it would have been really cool, right? If they had given us a choice, like write the type of stuff that you want to write, right? Like something like that. I don't know. But being empathetic for your students, understanding that they have lives outside of this, they might not just be doing your homework. They're probably also, in our cases, organizing outside of school. So if they show up to school and aren't performing their best, understand that they have more going on. And listen to your students. Listen to what they need from you and take action on that. Plus educating yourself. Educating yourself, and when you read interesting articles or you learn something new that you think is really important to our society, tell your students. Like maybe bring in articles, give them extra credit for reading them. I don't know. It's a thought.
Yeah, Rebecca, what you want to add something to that about, especially sort of like take into account what your students might be doing when they're not in your class?
Okay, yeah. So around like taking into account, I know that sort of a number of us like we spend our weekends like facilitating meetings, and then we go into school on Monday, and are like grateful to be sitting in classes. But I think it's interesting. I think that as like our generation is being sort of more, I guess, like politicized and empowered, and we're taking action, I think it's interesting to think about like what it means to teach students who are like very sort of independent and taking action. And I know like our generation is being told like we can change things, and like we have so much power, and it's been powerful to see that. And I think what that means in like a school context is, I think, interesting. And I think also I just wanted to build off of what Zoe was saying about how like solidarity looks like educating yourself. And coming into class and talking about that. I think that one of the biggest ways to show solidarity is that we as young people are growing up in like a really weird dissonance where, I mean, even if like we are being taught the science, and I know like I've been grateful to have received that education, we're being told that by scientists that we're living in a crisis and that we're living in a time of emergency. And yet nobody in the world around us is acting like that. Nobody's really panicking. Our society keeps going on as if we are not living in an emergency. And I think that we feel sort of crazy for listening to the scientists. And I think that like an important message for youth to hear is that like we're not delusional for recognizing that the world is delusional, for recognizing that like the path that we're on is like it's really confusing. And so I think that even like if you're not explicitly sort of educating about the science of climate science, recognizing that this is like a lens through which like we see everything in the world, and I think it can be a lens through which like all teaching is happening, in that like we are living in a time of massive transformation, and just like for this understanding to underpin everything else is, I think, sort of the most affirming thing for students to hear and to like receive.
Thank you. We are not delusional for seeing that the world is delusional. That's a pretty good one-liner. So one of the concerns that teachers raise, and they raise with me in other conversations, is that talking about climate change is too political. And that's why they're nervous talking about it. Now, several of you had some pretty strong responses to that, so I'd like to hear. So maybe, Ella, would you like to talk sort of, what would you like to say to teachers when they say to you, you know, I can't really do this, it's too political?
Well, I would think not talking to us about climate change is too political, because they're almost saying that they don't believe in it, so we don't have to learn about it. And so if they just educate us around what climate change is, then they're not being too political. But if they tell us that what to do or what to believe in, then that's being political. So they need to give us the facts and not give them their opinions. Yeah.
Thank you, that's very clear. So if they're not talking about it, they're kind of signaling it's not important enough, and that's pretty political.
Yes.
Yeah. Emma Jane?
Yeah, so I think that I definitely agree with what you said, and I think that this came up when we were talking yesterday, and the thing is there's a difference between telling somebody a fact about something and telling somebody what their opinion should be. And I think that teachers have the responsibility to be telling their students what is happening in the world, and this is a very, very big thing that is happening in the world, and to not explain and educate your students would just be like, what's the point of education at this point? Like where are we going if we aren't even telling students about the most important events that are happening? Yeah.
Some teachers might think, well, I don't need to tell you the facts about what's happening. They already know that. That's not what I was hearing yesterday, interestingly. So don't you already know that?
No, I mean, I do, but like, some people don't.
So
yeah.
Zoe, I think you had some illustrations of how teachers can kid themselves into thinking that students already know that.
Right? Like, so maybe they have a few climate activists in their class, but then the rest of them probably don't know what LNG is, liquefied natural gas, by the way. They probably don't know, like, how much how much cheaper it will be to take action on the climate crisis than to not. Like, they don't understand the facts because they're not learning it, because maybe the media isn't paying as much attention to it as it should be, or because they're not being taught it in class, right?
Great. One of the things that I learned more about yesterday than I wish I had, because I found it very disappointing, was youth washing. Youth washing. There are organizations and companies that are quite handily making use of youth climate activists to youth wash their organization. Arshia, do you want to share some of your experience?
So for me personally, I remember the first time I talked to the counselor that was involved with getting the climate emergency declared in Surrey. And so just like talking to him, you could see that he was very passionate about what it was. And he just like wanted to actually make a change, and it wasn't a photo opportunity for him. Because actually he asked us to keep it on the down low and to not tell many people about it. And so that made me realize, hey, like he's not just doing this for a photo opportunity, he genuinely cares. But like I remember one time we went to a liberal event, and so there was a couple of us, like at the end of the event, we started chanting about climate change, and it was supposed to be a form of like protest, but instead they got one of the liberal signs behind us and took pictures of us and videos saying that we were in support of them. So stuff like that, yeah. And I also remember another one where I was talking at an event actually, and So another candidate approached me and he was talking to me and he was talking to me about the strike and how he came, and then he was like, hey, so are you guys doing any events coming up? And I told him about this small event that we were doing. It was like a Fudge the Climate Crisis event, and it was supposed to be like we were selling pieces of fudge and like to fundraise. And so he said, oh, are you doing anything bigger with like more people? And I said, no, not as of right now. And he was like, oh, okay, when you are, let me know, but I don't think I can come up to this one. And I was like, that's great. So just like stuff like that, like we know when people are using us for a photo opportunity and not. But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I totally relate to that. Actually, some things that I think Rebecca and I have both experienced is the BC Minister of Environment. Wow, that's been fun. A group of us from Victoria met with the Minister of Environment. We've met with him multiple times, but we met with him this one occasion with the Premier. And we had gone through Clean BC, which is kind of like the government's plan for like climate. And we had gone through the points that we really felt like need change on and need action on, and had questions about why is, for example, LNG in Clean BC, like that doesn't make any sense. So we were trying to question him about this, and he was like, oh, like it's not really finalized, like that doesn't really matter. And then he took a bunch of pictures of us. Then those were all over social media, and actually it was hilarious. They took this one photo, which was kind of weird, just like of me with like a bunch of people in the background. And this year, when he made like his New Year's tweet, and John Horgan was like, oh, look at how all the amazing things we've accomplished this year. And there's a picture of me, that climate strike. And I was like, did you really accomplish that? Like, how much have you done? Like LNG, does that accomplish climate? Like, anyway, and so that is another example of, and like, yeah, it's just been crazy.
Just another photo op story. So, me and a bunch of friends were invited by the mayor's office to come to a press conference. They didn't quite tell us what it was about. We kept saying, hey, what is this? What is this? Oh, and they were like, oh, she's signing this. And we're like, what is this? What is she signing? So they finally got back to us like that day, let us know a little bit about it. It was like about climate, and it was like all new city buildings won't have, or will be powered by clean energy or something like that. Plus they were creating a youth climate council. We decided to go because youth climate council sounds cool, right? So we get there, and we say hi to some of the staffers, and the first thing out of their mouth is, hey, do you want to go stand over there? Like, the mayor's going to be right in front of you. You could just stand right behind her. There's all those people over there. Just go stand there. And we're like, no, we're good. We get told that like about 5 more times. So eventually they get the point that we're not going to stand behind her because, you know, they just got back to us about what this is actually about. And so then the mayor comes out, and we're like excited to hear what she has to say. We want to hear what a youth climate council is going to be. And you know what she says? We're sitting in the front row, by the way. So she says, look at these like youth climate activists. It's amazing what you're doing. Thank you so much. Will you stand with me? We said no, but so surprising, right? But I just think it's really important to recognize that we're being used a lot, and that we need to learn in school how to recognize when people are manipulating us.
So part of why I wanted them to tell some of these stories is we're trying to get a clear sense of what does it look like to stand in solidarity with youth. Not to ask youth to stand in solidarity with you, or to co-opt the kinds of interventions that are meant as disruptions, right? So I thought that some of these experiences were actually pretty shocking and disappointing. So yeah. One of the things that came up in the conversation is that some people worry that by talking a lot about climate change facts, by showing this kind of climate clock, we're heightening eco-anxiety, in particular for kids. And it's challenging to figure out how to balance hope and fear. I know you're talking about this in your organizations. What would you say to people? So you can't really talk too much about these difficult facts because it's too hard, especially for younger students. Yeah, too much fear, not enough hope. Rebecca?
I think that we are all already terrified about this, and I think that it's like the responsibility of our education to do something about that. I think, like, whenever I talk to young people, there's always this sense of like big dread about climate change, and earlier we were talking about like climate education. I think that like people see climate change as sort of this really big, scary thing coming at us, but a lot of people like haven't been super educated on the science. I think the stats are that like nationally in Canada, only 48% of people know that burning fossil fuels leads to climate change. Like lots of people know that climate change is happening, but I think that this sort of haze and this lack of information really just heightens actually our eco-anxiety. I know, so like for example, I assistant teach like at Hebrew schools on Sunday morning, and one of my students who's in grade 5, I was talking to her about climate change, or I think she brought it up, and she said, like, yeah, I'm gonna die before I'm 30. And I think that there's, that I was like, no, you're not, like, please, there's hope. And also, like, we live in Vancouver, like, that's not gonna happen. But I think that there's just this immense sense of dread, and that, like, we go to school to prepare for our future, but so many people have a sense that that future doesn't really exist. And I think that it's not heightening our eco-anxiety to learn more. I mean, maybe it is for some people, but I think that they need the facts. And I think that learning more about how to take action and learning about how climate solutions do create a better world, that climate action is not just about like resisting against this oncoming catastrophe, but it's about like imagining the more beautiful and the more just world that lies on the other side of that. I think that gives us hope, because we see that this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to create a better world. And yeah, we need education. Yeah.
Thanks, Rebecca. Ella.
We need to be somewhat scared about what's happening, because if we're just like, oh yeah, climate change, we'll deal about it in a few years, nothing's gonna happen and there won't be a few years. But we need to make sure that we also aren't so afraid that we're not doing anything, because we need to make sure that we're doing something. And if it wasn't this bad, and if it was like just like not as bad as the climate change problem is nowadays, I don't think anyone would do something. So we need to, so people have this fear, and if there was no fear, no one would do anything. So it's very important that we have somewhat a sense of what's going on.
Did you want to add something, Zoe, or no? You don't have to. Okay. I'm gonna skip one question, if that's okay with you, because I want to leave plenty of time for your questions to the panel. And the main thing I want to do is end with an opportunity for all of you to say what you want to say, what you want to make very sure that teachers and administrators are hearing from you today. So pay very close attention. This is what they really want you not to forget. Marsha, do you want to get going, or?
I think a big thing for me is when I do talk to teachers about what I'm doing, they do say, oh, good job, but it's kind of left at that. As a teacher, I feel like you should be interested in what your students' interests are, and you should be asking them, hey, what's going on with this? Hey, what's going on with that? I feel like the interest that students have, sometimes they feel like it's just left there. And I feel like if teachers are there for students and they talk to them and they say, like, I know with me, like, sometimes I get overwhelmed with the stuff I'm doing. If teachers could, keep, like, constantly just, like, be like, hey, like, are you doing all right? Or stuff like that. I feel like it's important for a teacher to be involved in a student's life. And I feel like just as we talked about, the basic skills of empathy. And I feel like empathy is so important for a teacher to have. And I know that, like, putting yourself in your student's shoes is something that is really beneficial, because then that way a lot of students are, I guess they're in a way, like, they're coming to school and you don't know what their outside life is. And so coming to school, they want someone that they can talk to, someone that they can be comforted by. And I feel like as a teacher, that'd be great if you guys can do that. Thank you.
I think you should educate yourself more around climate change, because I know, like, my vice principals, they don't believe in climate change. And so,
Could you say that again, just for those in the back?
my 2 vice principals don't believe in climate change. So if you educate yourself, you can educate your students more, and don't know how to help.
I want teachers to take away from this panel that we want you to show support to students who are going on climate strike, and even though you're not really allowed to let students skip school, if you can show support in other ways, it also helps. And if the teachers could just educate their students more so everyone knows exactly what climate change is, and so everyone can understand how bad this is, and yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just approaching all education with an understanding that the climate change is the biggest challenge that civilization has ever faced, and that the next 10 years are going to need to be a massive restructuring of our society. So many things need to change, and at such a dramatic scale if civilization is going to continue to happen. And so I think that just preparing us for our future with that in mind, and with that sense of transition in mind, and underpinning that with a sense of justice, and with a sense of this is a chance to create a more just world.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with everything that's been said. I think that as youth and as students, we are taking drastic action because we know what is happening, and we're calling on the world to take action with us. And I think that teachers hold a specifically and really important responsibility to support us in that journey. And I think that I know as a youth, a lot of the time adults tell us that our dreams and that our hopes for the future are impossible. And I think that it is teachers' responsibility to tell us that our dreams are possible and to support us in acting for our future. Because really, if we go through life and this lens that everything is impossible, we end up to where we are here today again. And so the future and hope and fixing this crisis is possible, and we need to empower students to feel like they can take action, and to feel like there is possibility for us to create a more better, just, diverse, amazing, beautiful future, and futures for all generations to come.
Listen to your students. Maybe spend the first few weeks developing a curriculum with them, but just listen to what they need from you, because it's your responsibility to give them that. It's your responsibility to introduce your students to the world. And right now that world is on fire, which is very distressing to us. So we need from you to support us. We need you to show solidarity with us. We need you to show political solidarity and to show empathy and to support us in our activism. So listen to what we need.
Thank you. We want to start with a round of applause for this. It's been incredible to hear your honest messages, to also hear from them how many hours a week some of these folks are spending on climate organizing in addition to their schoolwork, right? Keep that in mind. And as Zoe said to me very powerfully, quite frankly, this isn't really our responsibility to do this. We're doing it because there's a void and we're stepping into it. So it shouldn't really be youth responsibility, but you're doing it anyway. Okay, I'm gonna try to moderate questions.
Who would like to ask a question? Here. Yes. Oh, I'm going to get a workout.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Simmons from Fleming Elementary in Vancouver. I taught high school for the last 10 years, and this is my first year coming back to elementary, teaching grade 7. And climate change is a passion of mine. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your stories and your voices with us today and with the world and our communities. Your voices are passionate and succinct and eloquent, and it's been a joy to hear you. I guess my question
is teaching to a diverse range of learners with different interests and ways of approaching learning. What do you find to be the best ways of bringing in climate education into the classroom? Like, do you find place-based learning, going out into the communities and learning hands-on? Do you find videos or inquiry projects, group work? Like, they all present benefits and challenges. What have you found to be most successful to a wider range of learners?
I know Emma Jane has something to say about it.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think a really important thing, we all can collaborate. We can all bring our diverse ideas. And so I think something that would be really important is like talking to your students. What do they want to do? What do they want to learn? How do they want to learn it? And I think, yeah, looking at the principles of universal design is like really important, and yeah, figuring that out.
I wonder if Ella or Julia, you want to add something about your shelter project with the Greenologists, because that's an example of a different form of learning.
Through the Greenologist Club, we are doing a shelter project. So we go into the woods for a night, and we can bring as much or as little as we want, and we build a shelter, and then we sleep there, or try to sleep throughout the night. And so that way of learning is, I would say, very hands-on and experiential, because you could try to build a shelter and it just might not work out. So then you'll just have to do it again. And personally, I think that the best type of learning, especially if it's with younger kids, is something more hands-on, because they tend to get more fidgety and stuff like that.
Oh, I saw that hand first, but I don't know how to get in the middle there.
It's okay, I've got a big voice.
All right.
I just want to say thanks in particular to the two youngest ladies who've come from central BC, and where the attitudes are different in the teaching world. It frightens me that you have people teaching in... So who's leading your club? And how are they dealing with the reality that their bosses don't believe in it?
We have a really great teacher teaching our club.
Yay.
And I don't know how she's dealing with it.
I don't think she knows. She doesn't know that they don't. She was right there. It's not me.
Yeah, so this teacher, I would say she definitely believes in climate change, and I don't know if she is even aware that the vice principals don't believe in it, but she has helped us make posters and stuff before for our march, but we only meet once a week for around half an hour, so we don't get that much time.
Hi there. It's actually not so much a question as a point of information. I'm a school trustee, and I really think that school districts have a lot to do on climate change. Yeah. So, and I'm not going to tell you my district because that would be like bragging, but in our district, we have stated that there's a climate emergency. We have a climate task force made up of students, educators, and that's all like EAs, right, you know, everybody, and trustees. And we're working specifically from the students' perspective on what do they want to do and how can we as a district support them. In addition to that, we just recently passed policy on a student's right to protest. So this can be done in your school districts. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. Last year, a club that I sponsored as a Rotarian initiated a climate presentation at the high school. So we had Guy Dauncey, who's a Canadian climate activist, come and talk to all of our students, and then that club led our students out in protest. It can be done, and it needs to be done, and please keep talking to your school districts. Oh yes, and we're also making it the fourth leg on our strategic plan. So there you go.
Just to kind of add a student perspective to what students are already doing and how incredibly politically savvy they are, I wonder, Rebecca, if you can say a little bit about the work that sustainabilities are doing, specifically targeting unions and union-to-union contact, because I thought that was pretty interesting.
Okay, okay, so I'm not like super involved in this part of our organizing, but we have a team of people doing outreach to unions, speaking at unions and trying to just build as broad a base as possible. And actually that was initiated by a teacher who's here. Thank you, Ms. Collins. And so that's something that you can all do also is tap into your unions and like bring students to speak and try and actually, okay, Jane has more to say about this. Yeah. Okay. So similar in Victoria, District 61 has been really awesome in supporting the climate strikes. And there's some awesome teachers. I just want to give a shout out to like GVAT because they're really great. And there's teachers at the Greater Victoria Teachers Association that have really been supporting us in our strikes. And one teacher in particular have been really actually two teachers have been really awesome in like organizing the teachers unions, but not just the teachers unions, like the local unions. So like we had the Postals Union at our strike, we had the like Municipal Employees Union at our strike. So they've been really working, and they work in a group called Workers for Climate. If you're in Victoria, check them out, they're amazing. And yeah, so we've have gotten a lot of great support from unions, and that has been able to have us make connections with other people and to just get more people at our strike. And I think on the September 27th, they actually did like a whole picket, and yeah, it's been really amazing. Oh, so just one thing, like, yeah, our ultimate goal as a movement is to, if possible, build up to like a general strike, like general, yeah. So we need everybody, we need as many connections as possible. We all need to be coming together, but like tackling this requires like seriously shutting things down, so yeah.
That's great. I really believe in the general strike, so just want to add my gratitude and thanks to all of you. And my question is, we had Trenton Pierre speak with us, and we know that in the protest now, our First Nations brothers and sisters are real leaders, and I'm wondering if you've had any ways that you connect with, the original protectors of our lands, and how you're working towards this. Thanks.
Sure, I'll start. Yeah, so I think that it's a really important part of the movement. And I think that us as youth really take direction from the amazing elders in our communities. And we've really tried to build relationships with them first before we do any of what we do, because really they inform us and are so much more wise than we could ever be. And so I think that, everything we do in our movement needs to be informed by that piece. And so, for example, I come from Victoria, and there's a whole blockade right now at the legislature on the Algonquin territory. And it's amazing. And actually, the community that has stepped up to support them has been amazing. And the work that the Indigenous youth are doing there right now on the front lines is so important, and we must support them in every step of the way. I've been amazed by just how much in the past few weeks they have been able to accomplish. And I think all of us across the board, we are supporting them every step of the way. So yeah, that's really important.
I just wanted to say that we tried really, really hard to get Indigenous youth today, but they told us they had something more important.
More important, yeah, definitely more important.
They're on the railroad, they're in the blockades, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, what Emma said is like also similar to like what's been happening in Vancouver.
My name is Rosie, and I am Canadian, but I live and teach in America, in Washington State, in a very small conservative school district where kids have told us that they can break down guns and hide them in their backpacks and bring them to school without any trouble at all. I teach climate science. I do all the things that I would normally do in British Columbia, and I have kids coming into my classroom who are wearing Trump 2020 hats and saying that climate science is fictitious and that the current virus that we have floating around is a hoax and a development just to create problems. So, as students wanting to promote climate science, what do I say to these students?
No swear words allowed.
Swear words are allowed.
I feel like in this case it's not our responsibility to come up with the answers for this. But something I think is really, really important is that the climate crisis isn't political necessarily. Like, it's gonna affect everyone, except for the old rich people, but it's gonna get them eventually. It is widely recognized by scientists all over the globe that the climate crisis is here and now and impacting everybody. And yeah, I don't know what to tell you.
So one thing that several talked about is dealing with resistance, not just from administrators, but also resistance at protests, right? And a whole bunch of you have had to deal with negative messaging either on social media or counter protests, relevant or most of the time irrelevant, but nonetheless pretty vocal at your protests. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and how you've responded to that.
At our protest, we were protesting actually at the same time. There were some yellow vesters, and so it was kind of a bit weird to be out there while there's someone basically protesting for an opposite cause. And it was I didn't find that comment at all good, because first of all, if we were, it doesn't really matter, and second of all, they have no proof that we were, and they have no idea, so.
In Surrey, we do receive some backlash. I know we had one experience where we were having a fundraiser and we were collecting cans and bottles and all of this, and so we knocked on one man's door and he told us that climate change isn't real and that we need to educate ourselves and that what we're doing is wrong and it's not helping anything and it's just brainwashing us. And so we told him, we were okay, have a good day, we're just gonna move on. But he kept us there and he kept talking and he said, I'll still give you my bottles, but it's not real. And I was okay, but we don't need your bottles, we're good. And he gave it to us, but we didn't want them. Anyway, it's kind of hard. I understand where you're coming from. I know also when we did our Fudge the Climate Crisis thing, we also had this man tell us we were killing children and yell at us. So you do receive backlash and stuff, but I think as a teacher, you're allowed to present the facts, and you're not stating your opinion, you're not stating your beliefs, you're just stating the facts, and the facts are out there, they're everywhere, scientists have given them to us, it's not anything to do with what you believe, and so I feel you can still try to educate them on those, yeah.
I think that's super difficult, but I think at least in Vancouver, when people ask what we would say to deniers is usually I say nothing, because I think that we are at a point where the number of people that are denying it, at some point we're just not going to reach them. And I think if you're not believing in science, you're not believing in science. And I think that we're at a
now, like, incrementalism is the new denialism. I think that people who like recognize the crisis we're in, but aren't willing to like recognize the like amount of bold transformative action that's necessary to actually address it, like those are the dangerous people, and those are the people that we need to be addressing. So I think that, yeah, that's how I usually think of deniers. And I think also one thing is like, something I'm really interested in is in the movement is like a focus on storytelling, and how like we are at a point where like we can't reach people through like more stats or more numbers. And I think that like storytelling about people who are experiencing the impacts of the crisis right now is really important. Like people in other parts of the world whose like homes are being flooded and whose homes are being burned. And yeah, just storytelling, because we like are humans, and like the empathetic connection is so important.
So Claudia, we have last question here, maybe?
Yeah, we're pretty much at time, so make it a good one.
Hi, my name is Bryce. I'm actually a Seattle educator, so I work in Lake Washington School District. And so I really took and ran with the curriculum on climate justice this year, in terms of I teach 6th grade international studies, and I decided I wanted to revamp the entire curriculum, put in climate justice. And so I teach about like climate summits, some of the stuff that you just mentioned, looking at groups that are actually affected, Aboriginal or other groups that are affected through natural disasters and other things like that. So I use a lot of things that you're actually advocating and talking about on how we need to use Rethinking Schools curriculum, which is here. I'm gonna go see that one from Bill Bigelow. But I do all these different things, sorry, as we shouldn't do. But I do all these different things related to climate summits and mitigation and things that we're looking at. And I find that two things. One is the thing you mentioned about I have about 50-50 classes. Most of the males in my class or boys in my class aren't as really interested in climate justice or climate activism, but the girls are more active. I find that problematic. I don't know what the reason for that is. But I also find a lot of despair, right? You bring these facts and these different things, and it's hard as an educator seeing what's going on in the world to actually also not be a little have a little bit of that yourself. And it's hard to go into my classroom and advocate all these things and present just an unbiased view, but facts and analysis and information, and not know how to approach it with the students in the perspective of not allowing them to have despair. When you're also kind of dealing with a little bit of that yourself, right? You see all these negative headlines and things going on. Unfortunately, I live in America, so there's a lot of things going on related to that too. But the point is that what would you advocate in terms of talking to students who say, say Mr. Pingato, like, what you're saying all this information, what are we going to do about it? I tell them that they can be activists, that they can go out to these particular events. Women's marches are a great example of something that you can do that talks about that as well. But I'm not sure what to do. And in Seattle, we do have a problem with this, right? My old school, when students would go out and protest, they would get in trouble. They'd have detentions or other things, because you miss school. It's a consequence. You're absent, unexcused absences. And I don't really know what to do about that. I was wondering if there's some suggestions maybe you guys have for not allowing students to fall more into despair or something like that.
Thank you. So I think we've heard a lot of what you can do, like a lot of the kinds of things they've been doing. But one of the things that we talked about yesterday that was a question I skipped because I thought we'd run out of time, but now this is a fantastic setup, is to imagine other ways of living together as a more positive way to think about the really quite drastic change that's needed without wallowing in despair. Who would like to talk? I know there's some folks who want to talk about that.
Yeah, teach your kids how to imagine new worlds, like present them with the Green New Deal, for instance. Have any of you seen this like amazing video written by like AOC and stuff that present like the new vision of the world? Show them that. Have projects dedicated to like figuring out new ways of living. It's like really important to not just present facts, but present like that are negative, but present facts about how we can change and how capable we are of changing.
We live in a town that is basically based on resources, and even some of the schools in our area don't have the electricity, and so they have to generate their own way of electricity. And so the way that we can live together more is by sort of, when we rely on this resource extraction, then we need to realize that even though we're harming the planet, we need to do something to also, if we're cutting down 100 trees, we need to plant 200 more, and we need to do something to negate the effects of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that, the despair is real, and I think it's like something that is really important to acknowledge, is that like there's a lot of grief involved in this, and just like even talking about like climate change all the time as young people is like involves a lot of grief. And I think, yeah, just recognizing that is so important. I think that despair can partly come from, I know like when I was in elementary school, I got a lot of education about climate change, but a lot of the like action items I was given was like change your light bulbs, like take shorter showers, drive less. I think when that's like how you're being told to take action, it's very disempowering, because it feels like, first of all, those things aren't accessible to everybody. And so like if you're being told that like the only way that you can stop climate change is if your family buys an electric car, like that alienates a lot of people. And also it feels like how impossible is it to get every single person to change their individual behavior, like we never have hope. So I think moving into more of like a systemic conversation of how we can change society, and yeah, like as Zoe was saying, I think in school oftentimes we're really focused on being taught like how the world is, and we're taught these things like as static concepts, we're taught sort of like this is the way things are, and I think we, as young people, I think our power is that we're not as entrenched in the status quo. We are like still in touch with our imaginations. We were learning yesterday, this is actually like a neuroscience thing, is that between like the ages of 14 and 25, your brain is smartest in terms of creative problem solving. And I think that just really like cultivating this and encouraging students to think about like, what would a really incredible world look like? Like what would a liberated, like a just, a sustainable world that works for everybody, what would that feel like? Like how could our communities look in a way that works for everybody? And I think encouraging those conversations, and then empowering students with the knowledge that like they can take action, and talking about like how change has occurred in the past, and talking about how students can organize and can talk to government and can create their own alternatives, and how those are things that like power is in their hands. And that like together, when we all work together, when we have a compelling vision for the future, and when our society like unites, like we can turn this around. It's not hopeless, like it's there.
I think that's the best place to end. Thank you.